Washington, AP. The Pentagon on Monday ordered 8,500 troops potentially deployed to Europe as part of NATO's response force on high alert amid growing concern that Russia could soon take military action against Ukraine. President Joe Biden held consultations with key European leaders, emphasizing U.S. solidarity with its allies. Putting U.S.-based troops on high alert for Europe has meant diminishing hope that Russian President Vladimir Putin will back down from what Biden himself says looks like a threat to invade neighboring Ukraine. At stake, in addition to Ukraine's future, is the credibility of the NATO alliance, which is central to U.S. defense strategy but which Putin sees as a remnant of the Cold War and a threat to Russia's security. For Biden, the crisis is a serious test of his ability to forge a unified ally against Putin. Pentagon spokesman John Kirby said some 8,500 U.S.-based troops are on alert for possible deployment, not to Ukraine, but to NATO territory in Eastern Europe as part of an alliance force meant to demonstrate a unified commitment to deter any broader Putin aggression. Russia denies planning an invasion. It says the Western accusations are just a front for NATO's own planned provocations. In recent days, high-stakes diplomacy has failed to achieve any breakthrough, with key players in this drama taking steps that suggest fear of imminent war. Biden sought to find a balance between actions to contain Putin and actions that could give the Russian leader the opportunity to use the massive force he has amassed on the border with Ukraine. Biden held an 80-minute video call with several European leaders about a Russian military build-up and a possible response to an invasion. "I had a very good meeting, complete unanimity with all European leaders," Biden told reporters at the White House. "We will talk about it later." The White House said the leaders stressed their desire for a diplomatic solution to the crisis, but also discussed efforts to deter further Russian aggression, including preparing to impose severe consequences and severe economic costs on Russia for such actions, as well as to increase security in NATO territory. Eastern flank. A day earlier, the State Department ordered the families of all American employees of the U.S. Embassy in Kiev to leave the country, and non-essential embassy employees can leave the country at the expense of the U.S. government. Ukrainian Foreign Ministry spokesman Oleg Nikolenko called the U.S. decision a premature step and a sign of excessive caution. He said that Russia is sowing panic among Ukrainians and foreigners in order to destabilize Ukraine. The UK said it was also withdrawing some diplomats and dependents from its embassy in Kyiv. Prime Minister Boris Johnson said the invasion was not imminent, but the intelligence is pretty grim. Ordering even a small number of U.S. troops to be ready for potential deployment to Europe is meant to demonstrate U.S. determination to stand by its NATO allies, especially those in Eastern Europe who feel threatened by Russia and fear they might be targeted by Putin. "It's about reassuring our NATO allies," Kirby told a Pentagon press conference, adding that no troops are intended to be deployed to Ukraine, which is not a member of the alliance, but Washington has assured it of continued political support. USA. And the supply of weapons. The Pentagon's actions, taken at the behest of Biden and on the advice of Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin, are being taken in tandem with actions by other NATO governments to bolster their defensive presence in Eastern Europe. Denmark, for example, is sending a frigate and F-16 military aircraft to Lithuania. Spain is sending 4 fighter jets to Bulgaria and 3 ships to the Black Sea to join NATO naval forces, while France is ready to send troops to Romania. Read also, Sheriff Villanueva says he wants all metros to supervise law enforcement. In a statement prior to Kirby's, NATO said the Netherlands plans to deploy 2 F-35 fighter jets to Bulgaria in April and is placing the ship and ground units on standby for the NATO response force. NATO has not made a decision to deploy the response force, which includes about 40,000 troops from different countries. These forces were reinforced in 2014, when Russia seized Ukraine's Crimean Peninsula and intervened in support of pro-Russian separatists in eastern Ukraine, creating a forward force of some 20,000 troops on ultra-high alert as part of the larger response force. If NATO decides to use the response force, Kirby said the United States will provide a number of military units. "This is a NATO call," Kirby said. "For our part, we wanted to make sure we were prepared in case this call came in. And this means that the units that will participate in this must be as ready as possible in the shortest possible time." He said some units would be ordered to be ready to deploy in as little as 5 days. Of the 8,500 troops, an unspecified number may be sent to Europe for purposes other than supporting the NATO response force, he said. Without giving details, he said they could be deployed if other situations arise. Prior to the US statement, NATO released a statement summarizing the steps already described by member nations. Their repetition under the banner of NATO seemed to be aimed at demonstrating determination. The West is stepping up its rhetoric in the information war that accompanies the confrontation in Ukraine. Russia has amassed some 100,000 troops near the border with Ukraine, demanding that NATO promise it will never allow Ukraine to join and that other actions, such as stationing alliance troops in former Soviet bloc countries, be scaled back. On Monday, NATO said it was strengthening its deterrent force in the Baltic Sea region. The alliance will take all necessary measures to protect and defend all allies, Secretary-General Jens Stoltenberg said. We will always respond to any deterioration in our security environment, including by strengthening our collective defense. In Moscow, Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov said NATO and the United States, not Russia, were behind the escalation intentions. All this is not happening because of what we, Russia, are doing. This is due to what NATO and the United States are doing, Peskov told reporters. The NATO announcement came as European Union foreign ministers sought to once again demonstrate their unity in support of Ukraine and cover up fears of differences over the best way to counter any Russian aggression. In a statement, the ministers said the EU had stepped up preparations for sanctions and warned that any further Russian military aggression against Ukraine would have huge consequences and serious costs. This was reported by AP correspondent Lorne Cook from Brussels, Belgium. AP authors Yuri Karmanow in Kiev, Ukraine, Das Litvinova in Moscow, Jim Wilson in Berlin, Aritz Ferrer in Madrid, Jill Lawless in London, Lolita Esborda and Aima Madani in Washington, Mike Corder in The Hague and Raf Kaiser in Brussels contributed.